Welcome to Resourced and Resourceful Leadership, a podcast for people who care about the world and their impact in it. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Pettit, but if we run into each other in the real world, please call me Christine. Thank you for listening. I have a special guest today, and I think you're going to love hearing from her. Babs Adamski, known as Aunt Babs to me and many, is here with me today. I'm so excited to be here with you today, Babs. Thanks for agreeing to be part of this podcast.
Certainly. I'm excited that you're doing a podcast and I'm honored that you would ask me to join you. And I'm also glad because we have these ongoing conversations about our shared history and our shared work and what we want. And so I'm like, okay, this was an easy yes.
Yeah, it was cool thinking about what we would talk about and just like in the course of our conversations and like, oh, there's so much. Even as I put together the kind of general themes for today, I was like, oh my gosh, but we could talk about this and this and this. So we'll just see where the conversation goes. But yes, a lot of shared history and I really value our conversations. So it's cool to have one recorded as well.
Very good.
Yeah, awesome. Well, just to start out, can you share with the listeners a little bit about you, who you are, and anything that you'd like to share?
So my name is Babs Adamski, and I probably first am an auntie within my family. I have 11 brothers and sisters, and most of them had children. So that made me an auntie when I was a teenager. In my professional life, I'm a liaison between a workforce development center and a number of nonprofits. So I help coaches help their participants connect with resources for employment. And in my personal home life, I'm married to a fellow who has been a friend of mine for many years, and we got together after being friends for 25 years. So I'm somebody who, I think, oh, I can do something new. And I like to do something new in my community generally. I'm looking to mix it up. So that's when I think about leadership, I think often about something that needs some attention and how we can bring our resources to it in an organized way. But yeah, that's the short one.
Well, that's beautiful. And I love that community came up. And of course it did in your introduction, but I just think of you as a community sort, someone who has community, who makes a difference in her community, who creates community. So community is definitely a word that I connect with you, and I feel like I've learned a lot from you about how to be in community too. So thank you for sharing a bit about yourself. And you also mentioned that you're an auntie, and definitely that is my introduction to you as my auntie, as my Aunt Babs. And as we were preparing, I was sharing, you probably have more of a memory of it because I was young and I don't have a great memory from my childhood. But I'd love to hear just kind of your reflections on, how we met, when we met, and your impressions there.
Yes. When your dad got together with my sister, you were 4 or 5 years old. And I remember you being added to the mix of small children that my siblings had. And there, you have a cousin, Christina, and you, Christine, and there's also a Christopher. And I just remember some summer where I was at my parents', I must have been in my early 20s, and I was dragging kids around in my I had a very small Toyota boxy car. It looked like a matchbox, and it had car seats and booster seats in the back. And you were, by those standards, big enough to not have to be in the back. And that was sort of like, oh, how is this kid doing with this theme? Because there were all these other kids. And I feel like it was very, you know, I guess I would say sporadic because your family lived a couple hours away from where I live, but we would see one another. But really the time where I feel like our relationship got more solid was in your middle school years, and you identified as a writer. And I think it might have been your graduation from 8th grade. Could that be? That I was working in a bookstore and I was like, oh, I'm going to go to this thing. And, the book that made the most sense was a dictionary. And I remember somebody saying, like, what teenage kid wants that? Like, this teenage kid. And it was true. Like, I don't know whether I gave it to you and you said, this is great because I'm going to be a writer, or if I just knew that about you. But I feel like you were standing out among my nieces and nephews because you were able to articulate what you wanted.
Mm.
And as a person without children, I, sort of like I had a friend within my family, so there was that. And then your high school years, um, your stepmother, my sister Karen, was my boss when I was growing up. And I don't know whether somebody had put her in charge of me or if she just appointed herself. But I remember having a lot of compassion for you because I could see the same dynamic happening all over again. And I think around that time, I have a very firm memory of telling Karen when I was 30 that she was no longer the boss of me. But I think that made us allies, even though I don't know that we ever talked about it.
Mm.
I think,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we talked about it then, but I definitely feel like you saw me as, a person, as a human then, and you related to me on that level. It's so interesting that we connected around the writing piece, and you did work in a bookstore. I remember that. Not only did I get a dictionary from you, I got a thesaurus from my Aunt Dorothy, who's was not really my aunt by, but by relationship she was. So I think that's funny. I had these women encouraging me in my dreams, at a young age as well. And yeah, I appreciated that. I did feel like you saw me and you related to me in a way that is rare for children to be related to by adults. I felt a certain level of respect from you that I didn't necessarily feel as a child moving through the world. And that's something that's really stood out to me about you. And when I think about how I want to show up for my own child, is that respect and seeing her as human.
sure. And, that continues on. I, through the years, I've been fortunate. I've had friends who they may say they need childcare, and I can provide that when it fits into my life. But I have needed relationships with young people. I was never a parent, and I think I lacked the self-confidence, or I guess, I don't know if I would say lack self-confidence, but I thought being a single parent was probably more than I could take on if I wanted to parent in a particular way. And, I might not have thought that through intentionally, but I've come to see that really worked to my benefit because, people would say, oh, when you're an auntie, you can hang out with a kid and then do your stuff and then hand them off and it's over. And I'm like, well, no, that's true that I could, but that's not the relationship that I want. You know, I don't want to be a good time activity person. I want to be somebody who could be there, that I could be there for the way that a few people when I was a child really saw me. I was relating to a couple women who I'm in a book group with recently. We were talking about the books we read at different times in our lives. And I remembered a librarian in my grade school who would have me come and help her after school. And ostensibly, it was because I lost a book. But years later, that woman's best friend told me, oh, she knew that book was between your bed, your mattress, and the wall. And just because that's where you would always find it. But if it was lost and you were going to the library to make up for losing a book, you could be in her company. And I thought, I appreciate that about Mrs. Sound, and that she never said, come on.
Mhm.
Yeah, she knew that I needed some individual attention. And that, you know, much later, when I think about being seen as a child, she and another woman who lived in my neighborhood who would invite me over and let me take a nap on her couch. And they knew that when you're the eighth child, you probably could use a little more attention.
And probably a quiet place to rest.
Oh, totally. I still need a quiet place to rest.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For
And,
sure.
it's funny because yesterday, my neighborhood friend Oscar came over after school and he talked to me and Peter, my husband, and Peter had been working in the garden and said, I'm going to go take a nap. And Oscar said, and I said, I'm riding. And Oscar laid down on the couch and he snoozed. And I thought, you know, it's very nice that I'm able to be in a place with, a supportive partner and a young community member friend
Mhm.
who, wants my company. So,
Mhm.
yeah,
That's pretty special. Oscar is 9, right?
9.5.
9.5. Yeah.
And
And oh, go ahead.
well, he is barreling towards 10.
Yeah.
And this morning he walked with me. I've come over to a recording studio and he came over with me and there's a sign on the door that says no unaccompanied minors. So I got to explain to him about his status as a minor. So he was hanging out here and then his older brother came to meet him once I started recording. But I thought that plays also into a thing that, like, as a child, I was aware of who can do what when. And I thought it was such a ripoff that, and I think about Oscar, he's responsible. He takes care of his little brother. He does laundry, but he cannot hang out here alone.
Mhm.
And even with people around him who know him.
Mhm.
So, I appreciate our relationship, but I also want to help him navigate through things.
Yeah, I see that. It struck me when you were saying, because I do think people say that a lot about being an aunt. It's like, oh, you have a good time, and then you pass them off, and it's like you're not there for the hard stuff. And what I think about you is you are a good time, and we've had a lot of adventures together, and you bring a deep care and a sense of responsibility to being an aunt or being a friend to young people. And just that you could create a space that is safe for a tired 9.5-year-old to rest, and also to have that space where you can be doing what you need to be doing and your husband's doing what he needs to be doing. And I just really
So it
appreciate
has
that.
not always been this way.
No, no, I know that. Yes.
That was a particularly charmed.
It's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
No, you're definitely navigating like what it means to, yeah, be able to get your own needs met while being a safe place and, having a relationship with the people in your neighborhood, Oscar and his family and other nieces and children in your life and friends, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've been writing a lot, and I'm curious if you could share a little bit about that and kind of writing on
Sure.
being.
Okay. So there's a couple parts when I think about writing. I would like to be a regular writer. I love writing emails, like explaining things at work, and I just love some of my sentences. So writing is not a challenge for me. But recently, as in for the last few years, I've had chronic pain in my left hip. And I have been able to do the things that I need to do generally, but I'm not getting as much exercise as I'd like. So I finally, after trying physical therapy and acupuncture and chiropractic work, and this pain persists, I had heard from your cousin, one of my other nieces, Lauren, about a book called Mind Your Body. And the author discusses reworking neural pathways to deal with pain. And so the remedy that she suggests is, oh my gosh, I've lost her phrase. You might have to link to this.
Okay.
I just say 20 minutes of writing addressing difficult situations, either my personality, past, my past, like my growing up, or, um, even something, more contemporary, but something that where I felt something was unfair or upsetting, or something in a current relationship. So it could be about a person or circumstance. And you write for 20 minutes and you write with no holds barred, swear it up, get as down and dirty, angry as you want or need to be. And then at the end of that 20 minutes, you meditate for 10 minutes and then you finish it by tearing up what you wrote to let go of it.
Mhm.
Or I tear it up, I could burn it. It's funny. I know that my chronic pain is improving. I'm trying to think, maybe I've been doing this for a month. I'm trying to not really look and measure like how effective was that today, or, we'll just see if this works.
Mhm.
But uh, an unintended consequence is that it's getting me back into a writing practice.
Mm.
And when I think about the writing that I've been doing, it also brings up when I am railing about somebody or something that I end up with some compassion for that individual, or, maybe a system that just, there are things that are beyond our control often. And so I think that it's helpful in ways beyond the intent. And it's interesting, or it's interesting to me.
Oh,
It's funny. I know sometimes one could get evangelical about, oh, I'm doing this. You should do this too. And I think I'm doing this and I hope it works. And it might be helpful for someone else.
yeah, that's really interesting. People do get very evangelical about systems or writing, like, oh, you need to do your morning pages or you need to journal. That's the way. And I have just in my coaching practice, I definitely have some clients who are like, that just doesn't work for me. But I have found writing to be really helpful when I am in a practice of it, or even when I'm not, and I'm just make a moment for it. And uh, what was I thinking? But I haven't heard of this kind of practice of connecting that to pain, but certainly our bodies hold so much and the memories and all of that. So it's a really
Well, and I worked in a neurology lab a million years ago for a few years, and there were researchers who were investigating reworking neural pathways through. This was for a group that I think it was healthy aging, and so their focus was on physical work, tai chi, yoga, and then meditation to deal with chronic pains that people have as they age. And I'm 66, and I probably would qualify to have been in that study. And I thought maybe this is just the natural progression. And it's funny, I'm trying to not look into the science of this right now. It's like, oh, it's just a practice. I'm doing it. I hope that it has a good result. And, just trying to take it for what it is. And it's been a long time since I've written intentionally for 20 minutes a day. So I'm hoping that it will lead me further down that road.
That's awesome. I know when we talked about this during your recent visit, you mentioned that one day some grief around not being a mother came up for you. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. I think the grief was realizing that I probably didn't have the trust in my family and community to be supportive of me. And also that I told myself the story for a long time, which I just told you again. Like, I had an opportunity to become a parent in a couple different ways. At one point, I was thinking about adopting a child. And during that process that I was like in with an agency, there was an article in the New York Times about kids being adopted from China. And the Chinese government immediately shut down adoptions while they went through, this, looking into whether or not these adoptions were fair. And during that time, I got sort of like a sigh of relief from people around me that, oh, maybe this won't work out, and that's okay because you don't know what you're in for. And I listened to it. And I think that was kind of warped.
Yeah.
Like, I listen more to somebody telling me that I can't do something than that I would be good at it. And, as my life has progressed, I've had friends who have needed help, and I've offered to help take care of their kids. And some relationships have gone for many years because they were kids and I'm friends with their parents, and I got to see them turn into young adults. And now some of them are middle-aged adults. And I thought I would have been fine. And so it's sort of, I don't feel like there are things in my life that I would be, oh, I regret, I don't feel like, oh, I regret not having kids. I think that things worked as they did. I probably couldn't have the variety of relationships with the young people in my world or in the same way if I was a parent. It just, it's possible, but it just seems unlikely. And I really treasure these relationships. A few nights ago, my friend Isaac, who I babysat him from when he was really young, and then he's now starting his second year of college, but he came over to see Peter and myself before he left for school. And he was telling us about his love life and some of the hard stuff. And I thought, we get to do this. Like maybe he does have parents, and but we can also continue that relationship, being supportive to somebody. And Peter was talking to Isaac about the heartaches he had during college. And I thought, I appreciate that, this can continue.
Absolutely. Yeah. After our conversation, when you came to visit recently, I found this quote from Louise Erdrich. Erdrich. I'm like, I should be able to say this. Louise Erdrich from the Blue Jays Dance. Have you ever read that book?
I have not read that book, but I've read much by her, and I admire her greatly. And when I worked in a bookstore once, I saw her in the stairwell on her way up to a reading.
Oh.
And I was just like, not only is she a beautiful writer, she has radiance coming off of her. She's amazing. Like I could feel it.
That's
I think
awesome.
I'm fangirling.
Yeah. Well, a quote of hers reminded me of you, and it's from a book she wrote, I guess, the period of from being pregnant and postpartum, called The Blue Jays Dance. And she said, women without children are also the best of mothers, often with the patience, interest, and saving grace that the constant relationship with children cannot always sustain. Women who are not mothering their own children have the clarity and focus to see deeply into the character of children webbed by family. A child is fortunate who feels witnessed as a person outside relationships with parents by another adult. And I just thought that just really resonated with my experience of you. So thank you.
Well, and I appreciate that she writes that as she is becoming a mother, and that she recognizes that. And I think, she is, I'm not going, I will not say it correctly. She's a native tribe from North Dakota. And she is really a recognized elder, so I think she's wise. Okay, I'll calm down now.
Yeah. We have the fan club going. Nice. It wasn't what I initially thought of here, but it did connect to something that you say a lot. More than one thing is true. So while I believe you would have made an excellent mother of your own children in that way, also the fact that you've had this space to mother in so many other ways and see children as a person, outside of their relationship with their parents, and to be that has been, so many people have benefited from that. I know you have, as well as, the people in your life. And
Well,
yeah.
I'm glad to have been there, and I'm glad to be there. But there's this thing that I think about that has to do with these relationships with young people, but also in my community and in my workplace. And I feel pretty strongly that things that people say, oh, it's kind of you to do this, or, you are giving it up for, like training people or organizing some campaign when they're going to close the pool or whatever. They're like, I may be doing this ostensibly for an individual or our community, but it really has to do with doing it for myself. Because when I think about being a leader for myself, I want to lead in my life, identify what I want, and go after it. And I think it's more about my ego to do these things because I want to feel good about myself. And these are ways that, because I've had the life I've had, I'm able to see what could be helpful for both parties, So, like, I'm glad to be there, but I also need to be there.
Yeah. I really relate to that, especially the way that I really got involved as first a campus organizer and then community organizer, and now maybe just not just. I think I'm like figuring out my role in community in this phase of work and parenting and all of that. But what I do know is that it benefited me a lot to be connected and to be involved in things that I cared about. And it was something that helped me a lot to move through depression, just finding kind of that purpose as well and those connections and communities. I definitely relate to that piece about it's for us as well.
Yes. I also think, when, you know, going more broadly than relationships with individuals, but within a
Mhm.
community, something that has been very helpful for me is that I grew up where my parents were friends with the couples. Like, when they got together, they were a group of young men, a group of young women. They married one another. They had kids. They went to the same church. They lived in the same small town. And whatever somebody needed, when someone needed something, somebody within that group would find a way to get someone else that.
Mhm.
And, much later in community work, I thought, trying to do some, I don't know, I just thought of this term, inventory of abundance. It just, I don't know, that doesn't roll off. I won't write that.
Just can workshop it.
Yeah. But, you know, I can say this kid needs some adult attention. I'm an adult that needs a kid in my life. It could also be, you know, this alleyway next to the middle school needs a litter patrol. And here's somebody that's got some time that they want to do a volunteer thing, sort of a matching of resources. And I thought it's been very funny in my neighborhood. People presume I've lived here for like that I grew up here because I have sort of I don't know, added, I want to call it stewardship, but some people say old school. Like, I remember when I could get the key club from the high school to come help us with this. And, I think that it is sort of a thing of we can match up our needs and our skills together. And a lot of that, is just sort of organizing it and getting people to know one another so
Mhm.
that, you have a block party and people chat, and then before it's too long, someone loans you their really excellent power washer, like the things. I feel like I've drifted off a little bit.
No, it's perfect because, the name of the podcast is Resourced and Resourceful Leadership. And I think, community is a resource. And the way that we're connected to people, we can both be a resource and be resourceful within our communities as well. And you're definitely someone who's been a source of inspiration and support to me over the years. So it sounds like kind of cold to be like, you're a resource to me, but that's, I feel like,
I want to be a resource.
yeah, when I think about like resources, I think about relationships and money and material things and whatever, and also kind of what's within us too.
Mhm.
But I think of you as part of like a big part of my support network, and I know that it goes both ways too. I know I'm talking like I'm aware just of what you said about how it's not just one way. I guess it's reciprocal. Like,
Sure.
yeah, we've
Yeah,
both benefited from being in one another's lives a lot.
it's true. It is very true. And I feel like, that's like you and I have a unique long-term affectionate relationship.
Mhm.
Um, and I've often had to think about people who show up in my life who I'm like, "Mm, we don't connect very well. Why are we in this space together?" Eventually something will come to the fore that
Mhm.
there there is some reason maybe to help me learn something new. And yeah, I find it's important to me to think about that because I also don't want to be somebody who's holding things to myself that I'm in a like I sort of have sort of a feeling of privilege sometimes
Well,
that I've lived in my neighborhood in my city for many years, and I'm lucky. I know how to navigate. And when somebody new comes along and wants to remake something that I've worked on in the past, and I'm like, I don't know about this. And I'm like, maybe they just don't know the
mm,
history. And, you know, maybe they'd like to know what before they start to go down the same path that I may have before. So yeah, I think the thing about resources and also I think about you and the time bank.
mhm.
Um, and that that was when I really started recognizing an abundance of resources and, turning off this anxiety about scarcity. I think that I kind of knew that from what I related about growing up, where, you know, yes, things may have been kind of thin sometimes. We were a low income family, but I didn't have a lot of insecurity because I knew we had people who would help us and we could help other people.
Mhm.
Um, but, going forward into community life, it's sort of like beating the drum that, better together.
Yeah.
Good. And that's kind of the way that I would like to show up in my community as a leader is to find out what people need and what they have to offer. So that's I have this like when I have free time, I would love to do a door to door canvas or probably it would be have to be a mix.
Mhm.
Like a neighborhood canvas, what people have concerns about and what they would have to offer um, to help somebody.
I love that. Yeah, I was thinking about the time exchange a bit when you were talking about the power washer or
Uh-huh.
finding kind of what you need in community. And for those who are listening who aren't familiar, there's time banking where people exchange services and skills using time instead of money. And I helped to found the Long Beach Time Exchange in 2010. But I agree with you about when you start to see what's there and you're sharing, that kind of feeling of scarcity also can fade back. And I experienced that also with clothing swaps. And I used to have a hard time getting rid of clothes. And, I think we all, at least the two of us, we have hoarding tendencies in our families. And for me, that it was hard to get rid of things, still is on a lot of things, but with clothing, not so much because I would do these clothing swaps and people would bring what they had and I would get rid of clothing. And it was just a really cool way to see, I could try on different styles that I might not have. I would kind of get what I need, and it made me feel good to also recirculate what I wasn't wearing into the community. So that helped me feel just more like, okay, yeah, there's abundance. And I'm part of the Buy Nothing group in Long Beach, and that also, it's like I'll just give stuff away and ask for things, and it's great. I really appreciate that. So definitely that kind of connects to this feeling of resourcefulness as well.
Yes, I think about how many people that I met in my neighborhood because of Buy Nothing.
Mm.
And I have a very geographical way of tracking people, like, oh, this woman who lives on the corner of, Burr and Seneca, who, you know, I don't know, let me a mixer for while I would, so I could cook something, or, I'm like, I need to remember her name so that when I see her, you know, in downtown St. John's or at the library, that uh, that relationship is more than I just got something from you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So you've talked a little bit about what leadership means to you. I'm wondering if there's more you want to share there.
Well, it's funny. I think maybe I made a little bit of a mention of sort of an idea of self leadership. I think for some time I thought about myself in a very, like, in my community, to be somebody who, you know, could organize a social, or, make some call to the city, and that, like, we need a better crosswalk next to the library, that sort of thing.
Mm.
But in recent years, it occurred to me that I really needed to lead for myself for a bit.
Mm.
And that came about when I was in my mid 50s, and I'd gone through a period of being at home and unemployed, and then thinking, okay, what do I want to do next? And I had never finished college, or I'd never finished a bachelor's degree. I'd finished many a college class. I had many credits, but I did not have a degree. And identifying what I wanted for myself, which was to have a bachelor's degree and to work in community, led me to go return to school at Portland State University in the College of Urban and Public Affairs. And I got a degree in community development. And since then, I've worked for a couple nonprofits, most notably my current employer, the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization. I've worked there for over 5 years. And I think, you know, the for myself to have stopped my life to do something that would lead me to this place where, my work is important to me. It's an income, it's a livelihood, and it's work that's important to others. As a liaison, ERCO has me placed in a work source center, and I tell coaches about resources for their client. And I think it's sort of like the good circular nature of leadership is, I did something for myself, and it's resulted in being able to do something for someone else.
Mhm.
So I like to think that model is durable,
Mhm.
and I could apply it to different circumstances. But I think that really, the idea of leadership for me is really just parallel with community, that we all can be leaders for ourselves and within our communities. And that probably something that anyone that you might want to do, someone else may want the same, and you could work together.
I love that. I definitely think of leadership broadly as well. And when I say I work with leaders, like leaders who just want to be leaders in their own life, people who want to take action from a grounded place, people who want to show up for their kid, in a grounded way, in a supportive way, people who are doing work in their communities, their organizations, whatever that looks like. So I really appreciate hearing that reflection too of also kind of doing for yourself what you want and then being able to help people navigate that kind of sharing as well and meeting people where they're at.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about, our shared history within our family.
Mhm.
And I think that one thing that was really a gift from that experience was along with remembering that, there was a network of people through these relationships. There was also a lot of deficits.
Mhm.
And, you know, sort of circling back to the beginning of our conversation about, when we were kids and being seen and recognized, I felt when I was a young adult in high school, so not seen by somebody who would lead me towards college. Like maybe in the last month of school, a guidance counselor asked me what I was doing about college and was disappointed in me that I hadn't made efforts. And nobody had talked to me about it before. Not in my family, not at school, and I just remember being so put off, like, you're annoyed with something that I had gotten a message was not for me. And I think maybe part of that message was I'd taken a career education class. And when I identified grocery clerk as a job I could do because I was already doing it, that the teacher was like, that's great for you.
Mm.
Not, oh, you work at J&J Market already. Maybe you might want to, make goals from there. And I think that the good part of that is being able to remember what felt like an injustice. Not just felt like an injustice, it was like not being, I don't know, uh, fully seen, listened to. I mean, and I think, I was useful. I should have had a meltdown on that counselor so that
Uh-huh.
I'd be heard or something. Yeah. But, I think there's all these things sort of like we have to go through these rough times in order to move forward. And I don't wish challenging times within, a community or family for someone to have to step up and do it. But I think that's sort of the natural way that
Mhm.
things progress. Like we need a problem to work on.
It's interesting. Yeah. I'm connecting with the piece about not really being encouraged too. And it's like, so then what is the spark that helps you move beyond that? Like when you are faced with being discouraged, like, yeah, these discouraging messages or lack of that, because I know it wasn't like the main point you made at the end, so that I'm kind of going back to it because I'm thinking about just my own experience in high school where there was way more military recruiters on campus than college recruiters, where I wasn't encouraged to go to college. And I was encouraged when I wanted to go to college to go to community college, which is fine, and a great path for many people. But I could go to a 4-year university and I wanted to and pushed for that. But I'm curious, it's like, what is that kind of spark? What do you think that kind of inspired you to move forward, or how do we push through these things?
Well, I think I had some tenacity as a young adult that despite being told, yeah, you should be a clerk, I also had I can't believe that I just now thought of her. I had a neighbor, Nancy, who, no, maybe she was 10 years older than me, had young kids, and she would talk politics and economics and she was a stay-at-home parent who was really frustrated by being there.
Mhm.
I think later on she became a union organizer. But I remember her saying, like, oh, someone in town is, Chris, who teaches economics at the community college. She gets on my last nerve because she believes something, and I'd be like, what's that? And then I'm taking that class from Chris. Like,
Mhm.
I'm doing my job, but I wanted to connect with Nancy and find out what this was,
Mm.
and it just was one of these things where I had intellectual curiosity. I did not even know about financial aid until a couple years in. So I was paying for classes here and there, and it was just sort of a thing of I knew I wanted more. I knew I didn't want to stay in my town. The way to make a livelihood outside of living in the timber town that I was raised in was to have some education. And I think that that was probably it. And I felt maybe like I needed to other myself a little bit from my past. Like
Mm.
even in high school, there were friends of mine who were getting married the weekend after graduation. And I was like, I am not them. I don't think that was important. Yes. And then thinking about your story and, yes, you could go to community college and that might be what was promoted. And I remember feeling very strongly about you not going to community college because I worried that you would get stuck the way I got stuck in my hometown for a number of years until, it was like, I can't take any more classes at the community college. I need to go to Oregon State. And that you went right away. And then I don't know, you can tell me if this is true, but you were at Oregon State and then you did your exchange program to Cal or University of California,
Cal State LA.
no, Cal State LA. I was starting the right way. Um, and that you knew that was a better fit for you given what you were studying. And that was where I like true auntie pride.
Mhm.
It was just like, she sees clearly. And, you know, and maybe that you were remedying something that, I was telling you the last time we saw one another, I think your dad would have been a great scholar, but
Mm.
he was not from a circumstance where that was considered, He
Yeah.
told once that a high school teacher of his said, you should go to school at Reed. And he went to the Reed campus and he was so, I would say, culture shocked by it that he just was like, nope, this is not for me. So college is not for him, you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, we get there slowly and sometimes on the shoulders, our family members who didn't get what they needed.
Yeah. I definitely see that. It's interesting that, like, I chose Oregon State. I got into both Oregon State and University of Oregon, but I had this perception that a lot of my friends were going to University of Oregon, and I wanted to go to Oregon State to be different, which is weird because I love my friends. But I think similar to what you were saying, there was just this feeling of like, oh, I need to do something different. And then I did go to Cal State LA on the exchange, and I love Southern California, obviously. I always say sunshine and diversity are why I'm still here when I was only supposed to be here for 9 months. But it was actually a visit. Karen came to visit, and she was kind of like, wow, this is great. And you have, friends from all over, not just the country, but world, because I knew a lot of the international students. And she kind of planted the seed for me to actually stay there and was like, this is, you know, like a good place for you. And I did want to get my PhD. I knew that. And so I knew I would have a lot of options in California. So that's interesting. Yeah. But definitely my educational journey pivoted in a number of ways. So another thing that we talked a little bit about more than one thing is true, but I just I brought it up in a context that isn't maybe how you normally talk about it, but just thinking about how you look at the world. Can you share a little bit about more than one thing is true?
Oh, wow. Sure. It's, I think maybe this is an operative of aging that, you know, somebody that might be difficult might also give you, food for thought, or they're in your life for a reason. But I feel like, we live in a political circumstance where it's polarized and it's easier just to say, this, my way is the right way or not, or my way of seeing something. And it has struck me as not very helpful because who really wants to be rigid? And everybody in our world is going to have their own experiences and their own nuanced way of dealing with things. And I think that more than one thing can be true. It's helpful for me. I think, in my work, I have had a very difficult client in the way that she communicates and sometimes feels a little unregulated. But when I'm handing her off, when I got my new job to someone else, it was like, this person is a handful to work with. You have to communicate in just the right way, like text when she wants texting or answer her calls, within a few minutes of when she called. She's quite demanding. And she's had a lot of trauma in her life and she's unhappy about it and it's not been resolved. And she will be really great at the job that she wants. Like, in particular, this person was interested in early childhood education. And you might think like somebody who's not doing so hot communicating might not be a good person to have with kids. But then I'd see her with kids and it's like, she's gifted. She's amazing. Yeah. And I just think, there's these dichotomies, like this is with an individual. But, there's also where I live, we're in between two rivers and there's industry along the river, which helps our economy. And the industry along the river has to be really checked so that the water quality stays good, and so it's sort of making friends with people at the still yards to make sure that they're not polluting the river, or not that would really be the way, but it's like, it's not being a working class neighborhood does not mean that we're a lesser neighborhood.
Mhm.
We are a neighborhood of people who are working hard and maybe we feel ignored sometimes by the bureaucracies, but we're workers, so we can work together to do something. So, it's, you know, I think everything being all good or all bad or, I think things are just more complex. Yeah. And probably when I think about more than one thing can be true, almost, the predominant thought is when we're thinking about people in our lives.
Uh-huh.
It's like, yeah, she is very nurturing. She is very controlling.
Uh-huh.
you know, without anyone in mind.
Yes, absolutely. Another saying that I think has become part of our lexicon is this a problem or is this a situation?
Yeah. Do you
Um,
remember the genesis of that?
well, yeah, so you were taking me to Mexico when I was 17. And I think we had flown into San Diego. Is that right? And then we had a flight into Mexico. But because you were not my parent or guardian, and I was a minor, you weren't supposed to take me out of the country. So we had to find some way to do that. And I think you tell the story.
Well, this was the beginning of my love affair with Alaska
Yes.
because someone from Alaska Airlines was like, "You're not getting on that plane until you could prove this." And I had something from Karen or maybe your dad, you know, notarized and all that, but they were not recognizing it. So I just had the wherewithal to not accept the no and to say, "Can I talk to your supervisor?" And this fellow comes along, here's the circumstance, sees what I have in my hand, and then said, "This is not a problem. This is a situation." And it was such a huge relief to me, but it also was the beginning of some really change in my idea about, can something be worked out? A situation, you know, is like, in that case, he probably had done this. He didn't have to work out much. He knew exactly what to do. And, it would have been a problem if we hadn't been able to go on, the awesome spring break trip that we ended up being able to take, but I think it's that thing with more experience. You're like, this is just something I need to work through. And I think just the word problem can be limiting. And I do not want to be limited. So, I'm going to go with situation.
Yeah. Yes. And with I think an early morning phone call and some faxing from
Oh,
the
yeah.
little city hall or police
Well,
station.
that was what was being done.
Yeah.
But this fellow was like, that's not even necessary.
Oh, okay.
You just sign here.
Oh, yes.
Because we went to a notary and I just said, I am legally taking you. And I swear, and that you see that I'm swearing this.
Okay.
Yes. But I think for your parents on the other side, it was the bureaucracy of, filling out the forms. And I think they were both in worlds where that seemed very normal. Like, of course, if you fill out the right form, you will get there.
I love what you said about like how problem being a stopper and like situation kind of opens you up to more possibility, like what could be worked out.
Yes. And it's funny. It's like one of those words, situation in Spanish, situación. I use it a lot. I'm like, it's like, here's the deal. There's the always. And it's so funny. I like can still, this has been a couple decades since that happened, but I still can picture that guy showing and working his magic. And, truly a gift. Like, he was a good person in that job and he was a good person in my life.
That's amazing. Well, I'm curious if there's anything else that you'd like to talk about.
Well, I hear all these notes. Like, let me give a glance to see if there were any big things that I think about. I feel like we may just about covered everything that was on my mind when we started out. But I know because our worlds are not static. Things will come up. You'll be like, hey, there's something else. But I really think that you doing what you are doing now in talking to folks and examining, leadership and everything that leadership has to do with finding resources and having an attitude of being able to get what's needed. I feel like the the tables get to be turned. It's like, you know, I'm glad that I was there for you, but I feel like you are also here for me as I'm working to develop my skills and, my organizing, all of that. I
Yay.
really appreciate this time.
Thank you so much. Well, I really appreciate this time with you and getting to have this conversation. And so thank you for saying yes.
Gladly.
As we wrapped up the conversation and I stopped recording, Babs remarked to me, "We just took our phone conversations to the next level." And I totally agree. So thank you for listening along. If you want to hear more of the Resourced and Resourceful Leadership podcast, please follow or subscribe to the show wherever you like to listen or watch your podcasts. To support the show, please leave a 5-star review and share with a few people who you think would appreciate it. I've also added a feature through SpeakPipe where you can send a voice message to me with your thoughts on the show or topics you'd like me to cover. You can access that link through the show notes. Thanks again and take good care. And I would love to hear from you.